Welcome to the first edition of Dave Talks Ball, coming at you live from the SEC Unfiltered channel. Just officially, guys, I welcome you to the show. My name is Dave Shumate. I'll be your host on Monday nights and Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. This will be a two show per week coming at you, like I mentioned, Monday and Wednesday at 9 p.m. So mark your calendars. Gives you a good reason to go subscribe to us, just so you're going to get the notification. You get busy with life. I understand it. I know football's here, but again, people got to raise kids. People got to do stuff in the middle of the weekdays. That's why you subscribe, so you don't have to worry about the rest of it, ladies and gentlemen. That's just what I'm telling you from that perspective. But we'll be covering football, basketball, and baseball. Obviously, this fall, we're going to be hammering football as well. We're going to have tons of content coming at you here, not only from my show here when Dave Talks Ball, but from Chris Phillips, Cole Thompson, guys like that. We're going to show everybody from the SEC Unfiltered channel is going to be producing a ton of content to bring to you tonight. But first, before we get into Dave Talks Ball, power ratings, that's the first thing we're leading off. We also got some other things I wanted to hit on. Got some other things, SEC narratives that could change after week one. You know, all these kind of narratives like Billy Napier, is he going to lose his job? We talk about that. LSU's defense, we'll certainly talk about that. What's another narrative? Tennessee secondary could be something we talk about. What is the narrative going into the season that could change after week one? Now, probably not Tennessee because they're playing UT Chattanooga. LSU certainly. And some other storylines we will talk about. What some narratives, be thinking about that as you're following along. What are some narratives heading into the season that we could be talking differently this time next week? And then, you know, my background, longtime college football recruiting director of player personnel in the SEC. I'm a personnel guy. I like evaluations. I'm a big Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's here, folks. Personnel matchups you need to be looking for in the Big Four matchup on Saturday and Sunday. I'm talking about the Georgia Clemson game, the Texas A&M Notre Dame game, and then what other game? Then that A&M Notre Dame. What's the other one? Miami Florida, the midday game, and then Sunday LSU USC. Those four. I'm going to talk about some personnel matchups, some guys on both sides of the ball for Florida, Texas A&M, Georgia, and LSU that you need to keep an eye on and who they're going against for their opposition. Obviously, we'll get into some early betting lines. It's Monday, but there are a couple I like. We don't sugarcoat it either. There'll be some ones I'm actually betting against USC. Hint, hint, I'm probably going to take Virginia Tech and the Hokies, Brett Pry and the boys heading into Nashville. Only favored about 13.5. I kind of like them against the door. Sorry, Commodore fans, if there's any out here listening. Then who could be on upset alert in the SEC? I hear somebody, I got asked when I was on a show, who could be on upset alert first week in the SEC? I mean, first week in the SEC, I don't think anybody's Florida State. Somebody asked me who could be Florida State. I don't really consider that like a massive upset. There's not really that kind of matchup outside of the Big Four matchups I mentioned. But a true upset, we'll talk about that. I have a team in mind. And then what team program needs to win the most this weekend? We'll close out with that along with the early betting lines that we need to discuss. But power ratings. Me and my guy Chris Phillips are talking about it. None of us are really big power ratings guys, but I do like to come in and talk about how I rank these teams because I feel like I do rank them a little different. I know Josh Pate does his JP poll, and it's a little bit I don't know. His is off just Vegas betting, and I'm like that too. But the only thing me and him really have in common from this perspective is the neutral field. Who would win on a neutral field is how I'm kind of looking at it. And again, that's kind of Vegas too. But we'll get into the power rankings in just a minute. First, I'm going to go around. If you're new to the show, used to be on Mock 10 Sports, now on SEC Unfiltered channel. I used to go around the SEC, so we had some press conferences today around the SEC. Just some things I hit on. We'll go quickly through it. Chris Hilton, LSU receiver, out week one versus USC. It always kind of seems like he kind of has the injury bug. He's kind of always nicked up. It's not real surprising, but again, it's going to put more pressure on guys like Kyron Lacey, Xavion Thomas, if you're not familiar with, transferring over from Mississippi State, and CJ Daniels, the kid is transferring over from Liberty. But I'm really wanting to see Kyron Lacey take that next step. But with Chris Hilton down, LSU they're deep, but you can take a shot to the depth a little bit. Jeff Levy says Jeffrey Pittman is no longer with the team. He said that Kelly Akerari and Corey Ellington aren't available this week against Eastern Kentucky. State shouldn't need these guys against Eastern Kentucky, but both those guys, Kelly Akerari and Corey Ellington, were on my top 5 impact players from Mississippi State and Jeff Levy in 2025. They need those guys long term, certainly if they want to get to 6 wins. Offensive coordinator Nick Sheraton and safeties coach, defensive backs coach Colin Hitchler will be Alabama's only coaches in the booth to start the season. If you're not familiar with that, coaches, obviously, you watch football, coaches are in the booth. You see them on TV and whatnot. There's usually more than two. I'll say that. I've seen 6, I've seen 8. It just kind of depends. But just 2, maybe, obviously, it's just the full-time coaches. But it's usually more than that. Kane Womack will be on the sideline for Alabama, the defensive coordinator. So interesting there. I saw Kalen DeBoer mention it. But before we really get into it, does it not seem like Kalen DeBoer is going to be that coach? This is kind of overly optimistic, isn't the right word, but just optimistic every press conference. Like, oh man, we're doing great, we're growing, we're good. It's opposite of Nick Saban. You always tuned in for Nick Saban's press conferences because he was always trying to teach a lesson. That kind of almost made one of these stoic, like Instagram profiles you see where it's talking about, hey, how to keep give you great professional advice. You can learn something from every Nick Saban press conference. That's not a shot to Kalen DeBoer. He's just a little, I don't know, coach speak, everything's awesome, everything's great. And it may be, but I just don't think you're going to ever get a lot from those press conferences. For the ones I went and listened to. It's not right or wrong. It's just my opinion on that. Hugh Freeze says the players are handling the helmet communication pretty easily, you mentioned, but there's been some adjustments, and they've had issues with helmet communication in a scrimmage on Saturday. That will be interesting in game, folks. I'm just telling you, that will be really interesting from a standpoint of, especially in these road stadiums. When I was in college football, we were playing at Cincinnati when I was at UCF, and our headsets just went out. That's not going to be shocking if the first year with helmet communication, with these coordinators trying to talk to their quarterback, linebacker, or safety, whoever they assign it to on defense, if there's not some hiccups, some connection issues, Wi-Fi, I don't know. I don't know Wi-Fi. I'm sure Wi-Fi has something to do with it. But again, I'm not in college football right now, and this is the first year, so I don't know all the details. Tried to gather some stuff, but when you talk to people, it's almost like in the offseason in the summer room, and I get it. All these personnel staffs, coaches I know that were on the beach in the summer, they're not really locked in that, but it's almost like even going to spring, like, oh yeah, that's kind of a thing. We're going to have headsets this year. We didn't really talk about it as a staff. So I don't really think you'll see a lot of adjustments, I think, after this first year. I think you'll see a lot of adjustments after this first year with the helmet communication. Like I mentioned, I was interested on defense. Would it be safeties or a linebacker you give it to? Probably whoever you really trust from an intellectual, cerebral standpoint the most. But overall, I mean, I think there'll be some issues. It may be interesting to hear some of these guys talk after the game, post-game, going into the next week. Somebody may get fined, being like, hey, I think, especially for away games, a lot of these coaches are paranoid now. They're going to think people are listening in, or, hey, my headsets weren't working initially. Hey, if ours don't work, they shouldn't be able to use theirs either. That was a rule with the headsets. So that's an interesting thing I thought Freeze mentioned. He also mentioned it was kind of a myth that fans kind of expect these coaches to roll in and kind of know what's going on with the team week one and not be surprised. Like, hey, man, did you expect your team to be – man, you were really hyping them up in fall camp. Did you think they'd come lay an egg like that? And he's like, look, it's first game for everybody. I mean, he's talking about – because he has so many freshmen and newcomers on the outside at receiver. Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Keandre Lambert-Smith. He's not a newcomer in college football, but he's a newcomer on the Plains, and Hugh Freeze in that offense. Malcolm Simmons, like there's a lot of newbies like there. So some communication issues, stuff like that. And again, he's like, dude, we look good sometimes we don't. I get it. You don't know what to expect till the lights come on. Maybe you're playing a day game until we roll the balls out. I get it. I've been in the sport. I can understand that. I can back Hugh Freeze up on that. One thing I do like about Hugh Freeze, I've stated my piece on Hugh Freeze before out there. I'm on the fence with him a little bit, but you know how he feels in a press conference. I mean, last year he's essentially telling Auburn fans, hey, this game against Georgia, he was really sandbagging them, and they had a chance to win the game at the end. So it's always funny to listen to Hugh Freeze. Pretty upfront and honest guy. And then last thing I kind of took from any of this, Texas football coach Steve Sarkisian said 5 players were on this year's team before he arrived. They recruited the rest of those guys. So there's only 5 guys on Texas's current 2024 team that were there when Steve Sarkisian and them got there in 2021. It's his team now. And this is a big year. I've talked about it. What would be the narrative change if, like, Steve Sarkisian and Texas doing 9-3 in their first year and missed the playoffs? I don't think there should be some massive narrative change, but there will be a little bit. God forbid if it goes 8-4. Now, I don't think they get to that because the schedule's not that. I mean, they draw both Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. You get both those teams, I mean, you'll see where I have them in the power ranks. Still even Arkansas in there. That's a game on the road. Arkansas hates Texas. So that'll be a tougher game than just on the paper, it seems like. But again, 8-4, be obviously. 9-3 missed the playoffs. I don't think people are mad. Obviously, you went to a 14 playoff last year. But I think people would be disappointed. Next year would be a big get back year. You need it. And then finally, talk about Belton Gardner, running back they just added from the portal. Says he really fits them. Said he was fired up now for their standpoint. The transfer portal is open because it helped them. Because remember, C.J. Baxter, their RB1, went down for the season. I was with Belton Gardner for 2 years at 19 and 20. The guy does have the ability to be a really good running back in a good system. He really does. I think Steve Sarkisian and them will get the most out of him. I think this is a under the radar kind of late pickup. Like honestly, a free agency, truly a free agency in the NFL. So I just want to bring that up. Brian Kelly mentioned, hey, he knows they're going to have to play well against USC, obviously. Thinks they have an advantage up front of the offensive line. So you had stuff like that Brian Kelly was talking about. But other than that, some noteworthy things from around the SEC. We'll start off every episode, every segment doing this stuff, talking about around the SEC that we've seen. Anything we'll see. And real quick, before we get into the power ranks, I want to do a little, what did we learn from week 0? What did we learn? Florida State getting upset against Georgia Tech. SMU was kind of a no-show, kind of got lucky winning against Nevada. Again, hard to win in college football, folks. It's very hard to win. That's why you see people, those locker room images, those videos, coaches celebrating, because you got to celebrate it. You work so hard from Sunday through Thursday night, and even going into Friday night, depending on what role you have, if you're an ops guy or support staff member on the either side of the ball. But you work all week, players, coaches, support staff. It's just a relieving feeling to go in, especially a road game. I love going into the other team's stadium, quiet in the crowd, awesome trip back, whether it's a bus or plane. I always love that. But again, it's hard to win in college football. So that's why you see. So don't assume anything, guys. I'm sure Mike Norvell thought he was going to get a little more out of his Florida State team. I'm sure he did. I'm sure Rhett Lashley. Again, I don't know even know if he's familiar with the line, but wasn't SMU giving up like 27.5 points? He surely, for sure expected to go win that game in Nevada, and they got out by the skin of their teeth. Don't assume anything in this day of age in college football because there's so many unknowns. These early games are going to be sloppy. It's harder than ever to make preseason predictions. So many new roster additions. It's hard to even go back and watch some film of from last year. You do it in preparation for the season, but it's hard to garner and take a lot from it, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, it really is. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle you got to take with it. Take it with a grain of salt. But again, it's like teams like Florida State bring in a bunch of transfers all the time, bring in and out. It's hard to sustain that success. Miami will be interesting this year. Ole Miss brings in a lot. But again, I think Ole Miss is a key foundation piece. They got all three of their coordinators back. Charlie Weiss Jr., obviously Lane Kiffin calls it, Pete Golden, Jake, whatever, escapes my last name, came over from Kansas. But, I mean, there's continuity there with Jackson Dart, Jordan Wilkins, Trey Harris, Ulysses Bentley, a lot of the guys on the offensive line. They have continuity more so. I think people underrate that a little bit. But there's just some things we should go for, just some things we should learn, take from week 1. Just some things. Do not take it for granted, guys. It's going to be sloppy. You're really not going to know who every team is until about week 3 or 4, in my opinion. So take it to it. But let's get to the power ratings. Let's pull up the banners, baby. All right, coming in at number 16, we're going reverse chronological order, 16 through 1. Leading off, let me pull them up here. Leading off with, here we go. The Vanderbilt Commodores, probably no surprise. The hardest job in college football, folks. The hardest job in college football. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you get a conference win, probably their best chance is to get South Carolina coming in. I do like the offense. Think Diego Pavia, Tim Beck, the new OC, essentially a lot of the offensive staff coming over from New Mexico State. They're going to be zigging while everybody else is zagging. So I don't hate that call. Clark Lee's calling the defense now. So there's some stuff to like about it. But again, dude, they lost London Humphreys, one of the better receivers to Georgia. It's just hard to keep a roster. It's hard to keep a roster at Vanderbilt. You don't have a lot of money. They finally finished the construction of the stadium. So, I mean, it is the toughest job, but going into the season, I had them 16th. Coming in at number 15th, the Mississippi State Bulldogs and Jeff Levy, his first season. I think Blake Shapen, Levy couldn't ask for a better first-year quarterback. I know it's kind of a transition year. He won't be back. But the guy's won a Big 12 title in 2021, played a lot of football. I mean, you couldn't have picked one. You couldn't have got luckier. Not like he had that relationship, but I mean, come on. That's a big break there, year 1 as a quarterback. Defense, though, first-time DC, Coleman Hutzler. Felt like this is kind of a CAA agent hire. It's like, hey, Jeff Levy, we got you this job. You know, I'm speaking as like Jimmy Sexton, whoever represents Jeff Levy. We got you this job. We're going to pick your DC, too. That happens in college football, folks. That 100% happens in college football. Let's get it out here in 1 second before we keep moving on Twitter. All right, back to it. Sorry, I'm going to get that out there. But yeah, Mississippi State, again, first time Coleman Hutzler, DC. I don't know. There's not a lot of playmakers. Corey Ellington seems a little banged up. If I'm Jeff Levy as we go into the season, if he can just win his 4 non-cons in that week 2 game at Arizona State, I have a bunch of Mississippi State buddies. They're going out to that game. Going to be an awesome trip. Golfing Friday, the game Saturday. I've never been out to Phoenix, Tempe. Should have last year for the Final Four. That's another story for another day. That'll be a blast. But it's not going to be that fun if they don't win. You got to win that game. Must win if you want to get to a bowl game in Jeff Levy's first season. And I've stated it. If he gets to 6 wins with this roster, he should be SEC Coach of the Year no matter what else happens. I think 5 wins, winning your 4 non-con and getting 1 conference win, maybe at Arkansas at home, that would be no 5-7 losing season successful. But year 1, you take it. Coming in at number 14, South Carolina Gamecocks. If you've been following me at all, I know there's a lot of people that listen to this show that are big South Carolina fans because of Chris and the Spurs Up Show. Not a big fan of this roster, folks. Not a big fan of this roster. I'll be completely honest with you. Not a big fan of this team overall. I don't think there's a lot of fits. I mean, I have them going 4-8, 1-7, only winning against Vanderbilt. I don't know. You just have to get off to a hot start, build some momentum. I just don't see it. I feel like Lenore said, can Dow Logan's the OC adjust to running his quarterback? Maybe Mike Shula, former Alabama coach, Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator. He's an analyst role there, could help. I just don't know. I don't see it with Lenore Sellers and the Dow Logan's relationship. I don't know. It's just a feeling. It's a gut feeling. Defensively, I think they're pretty solid up front. Their best unit is the defensive line. TJ Sanders, Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley. They got some safeties, DQ Smith, Nick and Manowari. I like this. It's just a lack of little athleticism and speed in the backfield, or I should say on the back end. Sorry. I mean, they're going to be facing some elite dudes. They play Oklahoma, who's got dudes. Ole Miss got dudes. LSU's deep. I don't know if they have dudes, but they're deep. They play Alabama. I think Jeremy Bernard, Kendrick Law are going to be mismatches for him, athleticism. That's my concern. The defense get to carry the water early, and they go week 2 at Kentucky, who has 10 starters back out of 11. The extra starter they added was Jamon Dumas-Johnson, who starts up front, who started for Georgia last year. And Kentucky is the best interior defensive lineman in Deontay Walker. I just don't see them scoring a lot week 2. South Carolina could easily start off 0-5 in league play. They could. I'm just not a big fan. I don't think Shane Beamer loses his job unless it's 3-9 and you go over in the league or he's put on the hot seat. I'm just not a big fan of the Gamecocks this year. Call me wrong. I just don't see a lot. Even if Lenore Sellers is solid and can throw a forward pass, who's the weapons? Who are the weapons? Jerry Moore here, Hottie Toddy, Pascagoula, Mississippi. Appreciate you listening here, Jerry. We'll get to the Rebels here in a minute. But back to the countdown. Coming in at number 13, the Arkansas Razorbacks. And I have them 5-7, and I don't like that. I don't like that. I want to give them 6-7 wins. Show them who they beat. That's the problem. I think they beat Oklahoma State week 2 in Stillwater. I think it's a big win. I think they got off to a good start, but kind of fade because of just the depth. Have you seen their November schedule too? They could arguably face the 3 best offenses in the SEC in late November. And Travis Williams, love him to death. I was with him at Auburn, with him at UCF. He's the defense coordinator. His defenses tend to fade late because they're so aggressive. They're lacking depth. And here are the offenses they could face in November, folks. Just hear me out. Missouri, Ole Miss, and Texas. I'm not saying those will be statistically the best 3 offenses, but they certainly could be. You can make a case and you have no argument from me. You'd have no argument from me. That's why I think they kind of fade late. I think they really need to get one of those Tennessee LSU games in the middle of the season at home too. They really do. They really do. I just think they fade late. I really do. I feel pretty good as it gets closer, though. They beat Oklahoma State week 2. It's just a feel I got. Chicken, about 15-15. Appreciate you listening, brother. He says, Boomer Sooner. Chicken says Boomer Sooner, baby. Let's get back to the initial power ratings. Remember, this is who I have rating if they play in a neutral field. I don't really care what Vegas thinks. We probably think the same way, but I'm not going off lines. This is my personal opinion from doing off-season research. We did a college football preseason magazine. I feel like I'm pretty well versed in the league. This is just it. It's a neutral site game here, folks. Who do we got? All right, next. I got Hugh Freeze and the boys. Hugh Freeze and the boys coming in. I don't know. I think they're 8-4. 12th looks terrible because I think people are so used to people my age seeing, oh, when we were growing up, there were only 12 teams, so you were last. Oh, now there's 14. Oh, well, you're in the back end. Well, Auburn's just Peyton Thorne in that offensive line, man. Peyton Thorne in that offensive line is what it's going to come down to. I think they have some difference makers on the outside, but there will be a learning curve. They're kind of getting their hand held the first 5 weeks. They don't leave Jordan-Hare Stadium. That first road game will be awakening when they go to Sanford Stadium in Athens. Then I think they go to Kentucky and then at Missouri, something like that, or at Missouri, then Kentucky. One of them. But they're away from Jordan-Hare for about a month. That's a lot for a freshman to kind of you hit a wall. Like, hey, in and out of hotels each week. I'm coming back on Sunday. I'm tired. We're getting in late. I got school Monday through Thursday. It's a lot. How can that go? Peyton Thorne's got to be that helping hand. He's got to be the consistent presence there. I think defensively they'll be fine. I think DJ Durkin's one of the most under the radar defensive coordinators in college football and in the conference for sure. I thought he did a really good job at A&M the last 2 years, honestly. I think he did. And I expect either Jalen McLeod or Keldrick Faulk to step up on the outside as an edge rusher this year. Be one of the premier edge rushers, I think. Auburn, I think fine. 8-4 is what you should be expecting if they want to keep capitalizing on their success in the recruiting trail, especially in the state of Alabama. Number 11, Kentucky, kind of faded late on them. I thought they were an 8-4 team going into the season, kind of, and then lately with media days, fall game, I'll push them down to 7-5. Offensive line, still not sold on that offensive line unit yet. They got to get that right. The big blue wall. New offensive line coach Eric Wolford came over from Alabama the previous 2 years. He was at Kentucky previously with Stoops when they were pretty good, when they still were at the infamous big blue wall. That's one of the few things you could be consistent with Kentucky every year, count on, I should say, was the defense was always going to be solid, which is going to be really good this year. The offensive line was up front. I mean, they won 9 or 10 games, I remember, right, with Terry Wilson at quarterback, guys, and Benny Snell played quarterback a little bit as a Wildcat. Like, come on, the offensive line was a smash mouth physical group. They need to get that back. They haven't had that since 2021. They haven't. I'm meant to see it to believe it. I have to see it to believe it because Kentucky's one of those teams too in November. They don't have the depth a lot of teams have, so it's always best to get Kentucky in November. Moving on to number 10. Florida Gators. I think Florida's going to be better than their record is. Best personnel Billy's had since he's been there. Big week game. Big week one game. Big week one game. I'll give you my predictions on Wednesday. I mean, you could go see a couple of them on the SEC Unfiltered channel. Cole, Thompson, Chris Phillips, and myself, we've split up previewing these all these games really in week one, but split up the big four as well. So go check that out. We posted that out. I'll give you my formal prediction on Wednesday's episode. But Florida, again, offensive line, that right side. I don't think moving Damian George inside is what they thought it would be. I don't think it was as successful as they thought they would be. Graham Mertz, I think he'll be fine. I think Montrell Johnson, from reports, is he's going to be ready to roll on Saturday. I think Trayon Webb, number 2, is going to have to be ready to go as well. Defense, I think the secondary is going to be improved. I like some additions they have, but I think just the schedule's so tough, they'll be around that 10 mark. Oklahoma coming in at number 9. Defense, I have no question marks, really. It's going to be a solid group, all 3 levels. Danny Stutzman, Kip Lewis, Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, Woody Washington. They're good on defense, guys. Ethan Downs up front. It's going to come down to Jackson Arnold and then replacing 5 offensive linemen. 5 offensive linemen, 6 offensive linemen last year. I mean, outside of Jacob Sexton at one of the tackle spots or one of the 5 spots, and Fabechi Nwowu, the right guard from North Texas, those are the only 2 guaranteed. Bill Bedenbaugh, one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. He'll get them right by season's end. They're going to face a really nasty front early. They'll be tested early. We'll find out about Oklahoma after their first 2 SEC games. They host Tennessee, who could have arguably the best defensive front in the league, potentially, especially defensive line. Georgia would argue that. But and then they go at Auburn, and Auburn probably will be undefeated, I would say, going into that, depending on what they do against Arkansas. But I don't know. Oklahoma offensively is going to come down to Jackson Dart cannot be a turnover machine because they have weapons on the outside. I like the tight end spot with Bowersharp. I think they got some weapons. Oklahoma's a team. I got them 8-4. Wouldn't be shocked to see them at 9-3. But right now they're coming in at number 9 in the Dave Shumate power ratings. Number 8, I think this team's going to finish better than this. But heading into the year, I got the Aggies, the Texas A&M Aggies coming in at number 8. It's all Connor Weigman to me, baby. It all comes down to him. Obviously, the offensive line's got to help. I think they have better playmakers on the outside than people expect. It's just unproven. Moose Muhammad, if he can stay on the practice field, consistently be there. I think a wide receiver coaching change helped him. Janae Walker, you see some ability there. Noah Thomas, some ability. Now, to be fair, last year, I mean, they played with a second and third string quarterback a lot of the years last year. And then Max Johnson, too, after Connor Weigman got hurt. Still like the running back. I mean, I like Amari Daniels. I like Le'Veon Moss. I think they'll be all right there. Defense, I think they brought in some guys. I'm looking at Nick Scouterton to see how he does it as well, how well he does this first week. Torian York, freshman All-American last year. I mean, they've one of the best defensive lines in the league. Well, there's a lot of good defensive lines in the league, good fronts this year. More than I can remember in the past 5 years. It's a solid. I mean, you got both Shamar Turners. I mean, you got Shamar Turner. They got a ton of it. I mean, A&M's loaded, dude. But I think they come in at 8th. But I think they're going to finish 10-2. I do. I think they get that Texas win, guys. I think they get that Texas win. I have them randomly losing to at Florida early and at Auburn late. I think that at Auburn late game is a tough game on that schedule the week before the Texas game where, you know, everybody's going on break for Thanksgiving, telling them, man, biggest, we'll see you back here for Thanksgiving, the biggest game in over 12 years or whatever, since 2011 when Justin Tucker put it through the uprights to beat for Texas to win. That's a massive sleep game, but I like A&M 8, and I think they're trending up significantly. Number 8, Missouri. Got big question marks Missouri's defense. Big question marks on the Missouri defense. I like the offense. Kirby Moore coming back, the OC. They move Luther Burden around as well as anybody. I think the Carroll kid from Georgia State's going to be a good player. I think it's going to be more by committee, running back approach this year. They have weapons on the outside, offensive line should be good. Again, it's going to be you lost your best players at all 3 levels on defense and 3 defensive coaches too. And Blake Baker, they all went to LSU. So you're going to have to replace that. But I think the schedule is very manageable. I don't see Missouri worse than 9-3. Anything less than 9-3, 8-4 would be disappointing, I think, in 24. But I think they're right there at number 7. Again, this isn't scheduled. This is who I think would win on a neutral field if we play today. And some people may be shocked at this next one. Yeah, I got LSU at 6. Yeah, I think LSU would beat Missouri on a neutral field right now. I just think they got more across the board. I'm not sold on that Missouri defense this year. Maybe they got to prove me wrong, and maybe they do, but I got to see it to believe it. Still think they're going to be fine. I think they're a 9-3 team. But LSU specifically, I think they're going to be able to run the football. I think Caleb Jackson's the next best thing in the SEC at the running back spot. I think he should have a huge Sunday night against USC in Vegas. Offensive line, best starting 5. Maybe not best depth on the offensive line of the league. I think that could be Georgia or Texas, but best starting 5, I'd go LSU going into the year. I don't know if they have a Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr., but if Kyron Lacey can just stop being the spring game hero and let it translate, I know he was behind those 2 last year, but it's time to come on, pick your big boy pants on. Let's have a big night Sunday night. But, you know, a little sneak preview here Sunday night. I could see Brian Kelly getting back to his old Notre Dame game, folks, where, oh, man, he's been thinking about it all summer. You go read my tweet I put out before here. A kind of running attack that would make Les Miles blush. Yeah, I think they have that kind of matchup advantage. I do, up front. Their offensive line against USC's defensive line. Throw off play action, limit turnovers. I think LSU should win this game. But I think LSU overall, the defense will be improved. They're going to be much more aggressive. I mean, you see any practice reports, Blake Baker's going to be aggressive. They're going to give up explosives, but I think they're going to be better in the turnover department. They're going to force more negative plays. I mean, I don't think they're going to compete for the SEC truly this year. They're still going to be a solid group. Got them at 6. Number 5, Tennessee. I'm much higher on them now than I was probably back in the spring. I think they can have one of the better defensive lines. Nico's got enough weapons around him. Cooper Mays at center. Got to stay healthy. Only question mark, folks, can they be just a tad improved in the secondary? Just be a top 50 unit. They don't have to be some locked down group. Just can you be a top 50 unit? But I like Tennessee this year. I think they're 10-2. I would have them in the playoffs right now. Coming in at number 4, Alabama. Number 4, Alabama. Alabama's that team that's been just kind of sneaking their way through the offseason. They're talked about, don't get me wrong. But it's just kind of, people are just, now, they aren't talking about them at the same time, though. I don't know why I get that feel. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe it's not in my feed or my algorithm. I don't watch ESPN anymore. But, maybe it's just not coming up in my algorithm. I just don't see a lot of talk about Alabama. I don't really see many people put them in their SEC championship game, myself included here. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I have Ole Miss versus Georgia now. Back in the summer, June, spring, I was leaning towards Georgia, Texas. But I like Alabama. Alabama and Tennessee are the 2 teams Number 4 and 5 in these power ratings right off the bat that I'm a lot higher on going into the year. A lot higher on going into the year. Watch out. I'm telling you, I think both those teams make the playoffs. I think Bama's 10-2 as well. I think the defense is going to be real physical. One of the more physical springs or fall camps they had in a while, they mentioned. They got after it. I think there's some player-led. I think it's going to be a player-led team. Play Tyler Booker, Deontay Lawson, Jalen Milroe. I think it's going to be a player-led team here. Malachi Moore. They're going to have some guys, Jaden Roberts. You're going to have some guys lead this team. I think that's what's going to kind of carry them. I think Kalen DeBoer gives him that power. He empowers the team. He wants a player-led team. Those are usually the best teams, especially if it's player-led by your best players. Coming at number 3, Ole Miss. It's playoff or bust, folks. It's got to be an option. The schedule's too manageable. On paper, I really don't see them losing a game outside of maybe at LSU. They could certainly lose, but I think they're just better than LSU this year. Oklahoma's that swing team, folks. I think they're going to go 8-4 because the schedule's so tough. Actually, they have a tougher conference slate than Florida. But Florida gets the national publicity because they play the 3 big in-state teams out of conference. But Oklahoma, I think they'll be a really good 8-4 team. I think the schedule will just take its toll. But that Oklahoma's not ready for that. And I think it's just a really tough schedule for any SEC team if Georgia or Alabama had it. But I think, I don't know. It's just tough to say Oklahoma right now is going to go win at Vaughn Hemingway Stadium. Lane Kiffin's really good at home. And they get their 3 toughest games between Georgia, Oklahoma, and at LSU. 2 of them are at home. I don't see them losing both. So I think Ole Miss goes 10-2. They're probably in unless a bunch of teams are 10-2. So I get Ole Miss at 3. Texas, want to kind of see the secondary, but because of the offense, Quinn Ewers, Steve Sarkisian, I got him here. I mean, defensive line, replacing Byron Murphy, Devondre Splett will be tough. I mean, can Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins do it? Maybe. Not saying they can, but maybe. It'll be interesting. Lost Bo Davis. That'll be interesting. Secondary's got major question marks. They lost C.J. Baxter, their best running back. Who's wide receiver 1? Silas Bolden, Matthew Bolden, Isaiah Bond, who transferred from Alabama, or Amari Niblack at the tight end spot, another Alabama transfer. Is he kind of a guy? You need to find some guys to replace Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell. That'll be interesting to see too. But I think right now in a neutral site field, I would have Texas the second best team. And then that leads me to number 1. You know that. Georgia Bulldogs. I think they'll come in with a chip on their shoulder. Sound like they got some suspensions and they're a little banged up rolling in this one. I did talk to somebody in Athens, though. This was the most physical fall camp Kirby Smart has had in his tenure at Georgia. Take it with that. I think Carson Beck, offensive line's the deepest offensive line, I think, in college football. I think the defense, watch out for Mykel Williams, man. I think he's going to be a guy gets his name announced on Thursday night of the NFL draft. I think he is a big one. They're going to be lining him up on the interior 3-tech, 5-tech, let him rush the passer, be a disruptor on the inside. I think he is a big year. They're waiting for that guy to step up at safety next to Malachi Starks. Is it KJ Bolden, the true freshman, or is it Dan Jackson? Kind of the guy that's been in the program for a while. But that wraps up the week heading into week 1 initial power rankings, folks. There it is for you. 1 through 16. Let's go to the chat. Let's see. We got 6 chats. What do we got in here? Chicken 1515 horns down. Hit that like button, folks. Old boy needs another Red Bull. Chicken, appreciate it. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification. Chicken, we won't know till we hit the field. Rob 077 upset alert. Non-SEC West Virginia. Yeah, I could see that. I'd agree with that. But then sometimes I go back on Penn State, but I would agree with that. That would not be as shocking. Outside the SEC, yeah, I could see West Virginia at home beating Penn State. Appreciate you listening there, Rob. Yeah, we'll talk shit. Rob talks this, baby. Small upset. Texas A&M over Notre Dame. We'll do previews on Wednesday, Rob. Come back and join us again. I appreciate you listening. Then Lee Walford. Georgia will be the team to beat this year, in my opinion, for sure. I mean, they got a chip on their shoulder losing the SEC championship game. They got a lot of people back. Carson back. Got to find some guys on the outside. Colby Young, maybe. It's just wild. Georgia's never been able to kind of get it rolling at the wide receiver spot. Outside of George Pickens, I mean, Ladd McConkey's been the most consistent guy. But they'll need somebody like Colby Young. Ra Thomas being out is kind of a loss for him. But who kind of replaces that production through the air between Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey? That'll be interesting there. But Lee Walthor, I appreciate you listening. Going on to our next subject. SEC narratives that could change after week 1. Heard someone today say, what if they predicted LSU USC to be a 31-21 game? What if LSU held USC to 21 points with Lincoln Riley having all offseason with Miller Moss, who's a really good fit, and I think in his offense? Wow. I mean, if LSU holds them under 30, I think we could have a different narrative change about this LSU defense. Again, I wouldn't be totally sold, but I'd be a little bit more like, maybe they do give them a chance to get to Atlanta and certainly make the playoffs. If they held them under 30, I think that's a narrative that would be a performance that could change the narrative. Talking on Monday night and next week, the day after LSU, if that were to happen, beat USC. So I think that would totally change that narrative there. I'm all for it. That would be fun to watch. And it would be really a tip of the cap to old Blake Baker in his first performance, coming off one of the worst SEC defenses I can remember. Next will be another narrative that could change it to week one. Connor Weigman can quiet his critics, myself being one of them, with a good week one performance against a good Notre Dame secondary. Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. I want to see it before I believe it. I got to see it with Connor Weigman because I knew too many people in the building last year. I knew kind of the warts with him. Can he mature? Can he take on a more of a pro approach week to week and take being a quarterback in the SEC at a school like Texas A&M important? Maybe a coordinator change with a younger guy like Colin Klein helped. Maybe it did. But even talking to some people in the building now, it's kind of, we feel good, but we got to go week to week. I mean, I talked to an NFL scout who was at an A&M practice in fall camp, and he said, you know what? The kid at Arkansas, Taylor Green, looked better than Connor Weigman the one day I was at A&M's practice. And he kept prefacing, it was one practice I was at. He just could have had a bad day. We all have bad days in all aspects of life. You do. I do. We all do. So give the kid a break. But, I mean, if he did go have a big game, that changed the narrative for me. I'd be like, yeah, I think Connor Weigman's the dude, man. At that point, I mean, he's going to get some really good Notre Dame defense. Al Golden's turned that defense around. He's the defense coordinator at Notre Dame. But they got guys in the secondary, Xavier Watts. Benjamin Morrison's a guy that's going to be a dude. Jaden Mickey. I mean, they got dudes, man. Notre Dame's got a loaded secondary. You can't always say that, but I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you, folks. Vol Steak here before he goes. What did he say, Vol State? What team is Cole Thompson a fan of? Cole Thompson, no, I don't. Cole went to Alabama. I don't think he's a fan of Florida. You also said, hey, man, you called it on Tennessee being the team of destiny in baseball. You're right. Props. Appreciate it, dude. No, I just had a feeling they were a really good baseball team last year. But I appreciate you listening there, Vol Steak. Yeah, that would totally quiet the crowd for Connor Weigman. That would totally quiet the crowd. And I don't think there's a lot of people doubting him. I'm the one I just want to see it. Because every time I would see it middle gap blitzes, go watch the Auburn game from last year. Unfortunately, the game he got hurt. He looked like if he took a shot in the A gap underneath his chin strap, it would affect him the rest of the game. I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong. But maybe he matured over that. That was a long time ago. That was back in October, early October. Just always kind of stuck with me and things out here. So he's going to have a chance to really go silence the critics like me out there. So that would change. That'd be a narrative it would change, at least in my opinion. What would be the narrative on Shane Beamer with a poor week one showing in year 4? Everybody thinks Shane Beamer's back in 2025. Me personally, too. I think 4-8 he's even back. 5-7 he's back. 6-6 he's certainly back. 3-9 with a loss to Vanderbilt. I don't know if he is back. And certainly a week one poor showing against Old Dominion, who was a bowl team last year. Dominion was a bowl team last year, so give them the benefit of the doubt over there. I mean, just give them the benefit of the doubt. That honestly leads me to my upset pick. I'm kind of skipping ahead on a segment here, but I think it transitions perfectly into this. They're the team I think on the upset alert outside of any of the A&M, Notre Dame, LSU, USC, Georgia clubs. I don't think that's on upset alert there. Like a true upset. I think most likely, I'm not saying it's happening. I just think if you made me put my feet to the fire and said, Dave, a true upset in this league. I mean, I'm competing against UT Chattanooga, Tennessee ain't happening. Western Kentucky, Alabama ain't happening. Furman, Ole Miss isn't happening. Eastern Kentucky isn't happening. God forbid if that were to happen against Jeff Levy in his first game against Mississippi State. I mean, what other games am I missing here? Arkansas, Pine Bluff ain't happening. Temple, Oklahoma is not happening. Southern Miss, Kentucky. I may take Southern Miss in the -27 or plus 27.5. But they're not going to straight up beat Kentucky. This would be the one, folks. And South Carolina fans get mad about it. But this is 100% the only game. This is the only game that makes sense as a true upset. Michael Anthony, what did he say? Sorry. Facebook's been showing when I'm shooting down the real rabbit hole. Enjoy listening to what you have to say. Appreciate you listening there, Michael. Appreciate you listening there, brother. Keep coming. We'll be back on Wednesday. But back to the Gamecocks. I hadn't really been attacked in the room yet. Maybe it's coming. Maybe I'm summoning it. But this is the only one that kind of hits the mold of a true upset. If we're being completely honest, I think the line's up to 21 now. I think I would take Old Dominion. Now, I think Shane Beamer's going to run up the score if he gets a chance, because you can't have a bad look like that going into a big Week 2 SEC matchup in Lexington that both you and Kentucky need. You've beaten them 2 times in a row. They're going to be pissed off at Kroger Field. You need to look good in this one, Shane, but if they didn't, not even just didn't lose, they took it into the fourth quarter, people may have their question marks. It'd be interesting if people started flipping on Shane Beamer at that point. And then finally, can Georgia change the narrative? Can they get kind of back to the standard? Can they get back to the standard of the defense? Last year, they weren't great against the run on the interior. Some of that was injury. Some of that was scheme, the tight mid front. They're kind of conceding that to limit explosive plays. Remember, in college football now, folks, offensively and defensively. On offense, it's about generating explosive plays. On defense, it's about limiting explosive plays. That's the game now. Not many teams are 2020 Texas A&M's offense where you're going to have 10 to 12 play drives. It's not going to happen and be number 1 in third down percentage on offense. That's what A&M and Kellen Mond and them did that year. That's a lot to ask to be in 3rd and 3 pretty often. You got to generate explosive plays to win in college football now. It just is. You got to limit them on the defensive side of the ball. Yards per game means nothing now. Total defense means that's a total waste of a stat, folks. So don't waste your time looking at it. It's about limiting explosive plays, being good in the red zone. That wins on defense now, and being good in the turnover department. But overall for Georgia, I do think they will improve on the interior because I think that's Kirby Smart and Glenn Schuman's bread and butter. They have pride. That's pride. They're not going to want people just running down their throat. I could see it's going to be a tough out. I mean, you have 4 starters back on the offensive line for Clemson. Former Georgia offensive line coach and Ole Miss head coach Matt Luke is now the offensive line coach at Clemson. That'll be a good battle in the trenches, really. If they stop the run against them and Phil Maffa, the running back for Clemson, that would be impressive. That'd be one of Georgia's best run game performances in since Jalen Carter and the boys roamed the sideline in 22, the national champions, the second team in a row to win it at Georgia. I know it's only 1 year. There's no need to panic. But I think if they limit Clemson's run game to under 100 yards, 120 yards this upcoming week, like true rushing yards, I think that narrative could change a little bit. Like, hey, Georgia did make some adjustments. They're going to be better in the interior. God willing, there's not a bunch of injuries. They're going to be better in the interior this year. Glenn Schumann, Kirby Smart made that a priority. So I think that's a narrative we could also see change heading after week 1. Mentioned upset alert, already got into that. I'm telling you, folks, people don't like it, but it's going to be the South Carolina game. Vol State, he's back, baby. He says, I think the old Georgia State head coach will take over for South Carolina. He should have been the South Carolina coach a long time ago. Sean Elliott, you talking about? Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't think Beamer's gone this year, folks. I don't think unless it got 3-9. Unless he got 3-9 with a loss to Vanderbilt. And let me just spell it out for you, too. I know South Carolina fans are going to get pissed about this. There's not a lot on their schedule in their first 5 conference games to generate some wins. So you look bad against Old Dominion, not saying it's going to happen, but if you did, and then you lose to Kentucky week 2, you got LSU coming to town. You should get the Akron win. You get Ole Miss coming to town. You go to Alabama. You go to Oklahoma. I don't see that offense generating a lot. I just don't. I don't. And then an 0-5 conference team coming off a bye week, they're heading to Nashville in an empty stadium. There's not a lot going on. That smells recipe for upset. If you told me Vanderbilt were to get a conference win this year, it'd be South Carolina at home in October, I believe, October 12th or something. Yeah, I would totally bet that. If you made me say, hey, what's a Vanderbilt win this year? I don't think they'll win that right now. But if you said Vanderbilt wins a conference game, which one it is, it's like, oh, when South Carolina rolls to town. Just telling you. Just telling you, folks. All right. Personnel matchups. A couple more segments. Personnel matchups I like. Again, I'm a long-time director of player personnel, recruiting guy. I'm a big-time evaluator. I love evaluating film. I'm not that big of an X's and O's guys. I don't try to pretend to be. I mean, I know the basics, but I'm a personnel guy. I love putting rosters together that fit certain schemes. But I just like watching the players for what they are and trying to find mismatches. We'd always do advanced scouting for coaches everywhere I was at in the SEC, even when I was at Kansas and UCF. We put that together. Coaches would really appreciate that because we'd have write-ups on every individual player in the 2 deep of the opposition that they were playing. We were always a week ahead. So I always liked evaluating. I like this. So these are some matchups. These are some matchups I like. Oh, Blake Ruffino in here, baby. Are you serious, sports? Blake, appreciate you watching, dog. What's going on in this thing? Blake, we're just talking about some personnel matchups. Let me take the text. Some personnel matchups going on week one. Week one. We're talking about some personnel matchups, some things we can take advantage of in the top 4 games. Leading off this Georgia-Clemson game, we're going to go in chronological order of the day. On offense, one offensive player, one defensive player here. Georgia, Trevor Etienne. This is the first time that Georgia, I feel like, has had kind of 2 bona fide playmakers that are kind of home run threats. Last year, I thought they were missing that. There were a couple plays, if you go back and watch the game, with their offensive line, Stacey Searles' group was opening up holes that you're like, man, that guy could have took that 65-70 and scored. He was that dude. I think this year they're going to be more explosive at that spot since DeAndre Swift was there. Trevor Etienne can make plays in the passing game. He's an explosive threat. And then true freshman from modern day, Nate Frazier. He's an explosive threat too. Burst, acceleration, though. I'm telling you, that guy's a home run ability. Yeah, he can make people miss at the second level if the offensive line gets in there, if they get in there. Also, it sounds like Roderick Robinson's going to be out with a toe injury. Branson Robinson's coming off for an injury. You're going to see Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier. So get used to those names, but specifically Trevor Etienne, the Florida transfer, how he matches up against a guy like Barrett Carter, the inside linebacker for Clemson. On defense, Mykel Williams, they want to move him around a lot. Glenn Schumann, Kirby Smart, 3-tech, 5-tech, some 4-eye, some shades. They're going to try to find their advantages. And now, to be fair to Clemson, they got a new offensive line coach. I just mentioned it, Matt Luke. But they have 7 players with a minimum of 3 career starts returning on that offensive line. 4 starters. They got to replace the center. That's where Georgia's probably sitting there all offseason, being like, how do we attack this center? How do we attack this center? That's what they have to be generating. And Georgia's kind of got to have that chip on their shoulder because I don't think that was a very good front last year. Now, some of it was because of injuries. Some of it was because of injuries at the second level. Linebackers hurt. Jamon Dumas-Johnson. We talked about it. He transferred to Kentucky. He got hurt. Didn't even play in the SEC championship game last year. I think Georgia's defensive line, Trey Scott's group, defensive line coach at Georgia, they're going to have a chip on their shoulder. Chidera Uzo-Uribe, the outside backers coach, guys like Chaz Chambliss, Damon Wilson. I think that whole front as a whole is going to be key, but watch out for Mykel Williams. I think he's a guy that could get his name into that Thursday night getting announced at the NFL draft this next year. But those are the 2 players to watch for Georgia with a matchup advantage, too. I think that's one of the more fun matchup advantages in the entire first Saturday. That Clemson offensive line, veteran group, going against this Georgia group. It's going to look a little different with probably a little bit like, hey, they felt like they've been doubted all year. Like, hey, man, Alabama in the SEC championship game went and ran it down our throats when we gave them the ball back with about 3 minutes left and ran the clock out to win the SEC championship. Georgia prides themselves on that not happening and getting big boy. That's what they do to people. So I think this group's been talked about a lot this offseason. I expect to see them. Florida, again, they play Miami, 3:30 Eastern. Kind of feels like a Edge versus Matt Hardy loser leave town match back when they had their little drama with Lita. It kind of feels like that. Now, I don't think it's completely over for the loser. I think Billy needs it a little more than Mario. I think Mario can go collect it a little bit more in the ACC, a little better. But just 2 players to keep an eye on here. Running back Trayon Webb from Jacksonville, Florida, RB2. I don't mention Montrell Johnson, even though we mentioned him earlier in the show. That it sounds like he's going to be available 100%. I don't know about 100%. You're never 100%, but he's going to be full go against Miami. Trayon Webb's going to have to help, though. He's going to have to really help. He's going to have a big day on Saturday, I think. And I think he could. I think there's some advantages they can take it on the left side of the offensive line and at the center spot with Jake Slaughter, Najee Harris, and Austin Barber on the left side. The right side's struggling a little bit, but if they can set that edge on the left side, I think there's going to be plays to be made against that Miami front. I think there will be this year. Trayon Webb's going to have to help, though. I don't think Montrell Johnson's going to be able to carry the load. They need some more explosive plays, too. Outside of Eugene Trey Wilson, they don't really have it, especially with Trevor Etienne transferring. So pay attention to Trayon Webb here. Pay attention. He's a big-time prospect at a trendy Christian in Jacksonville. This is his time to step up on Saturday. And then on defense, I'm going to go corner. Devin Moore. I think it's going to be an improved secondary this year. I think the safety Asa Turner helped him be that accountable guy, chip on their shoulder guy. Jason Marshall, I think it's going to be improved. This was the second year last year it lacked confidence. They were a poor tackling team. Go watch the Georgia game from last year, the world's largest cocktail party. There were guys that were scared getting out of the way, taking themselves out of plays. They were scared. I think that changes a little bit this year. I think Devin Moore, the Bishop Moore kid out of Orlando, I remember recruiting him when I was in it. He's going to get the job either covering Xavier Restrepo, the receiver from Miami, or Jacoby George, because Devin Moore, I think, is going to be their second best corner guy. I mean, probably Jason Marshall gets the nod to cover Restrepo, who's a dynamic receiver, a good player as well. I think Moore gets the nod at Jacoby George, but I think he's going to have a key impact, a key interception late. I don't know. It's just a feel. I think Devin Moore's going to be one of the more improved players in the league, and for Florida in the secondary, another guy to keep an eye on. For Texas A&M, I mentioned it earlier. I think their whole season comes down to Connor Weigman, but it's Connor Weigman. Season starts and finishes with him. Fantastic first test. We talked about Notre Dame a little bit. Fantastic first test. Al Golden had a rough first year. Yes, that Al Golden, former Miami head coach, had a rough first year in South Bend, but turned it around. I mean, he runs a 3.35 and a 4.25. He'll switch it up, switch alignment based on whatever the offense is showing. And it'll be interesting to see what Colin Klein and then show that first year. I'm interested to see what he does coming over from Kansas State. He's had a lot of just quarterbacks who could run between the tackles. Will Howard, Skylar Thompson. Hell, Colin Klein was a quarterback who used to run a lot under Bill Snyder. But Notre Dame has the personnel to change up seamlessly. I'm just telling you, they're really good in the red zone. So I think A&M, that's an under the radar storyline. They're going to have to generate some explosives. I think last year, Notre Dame was just 41.2%. Yeah, right. Read it right here. Of the opponent red zone trips. That's third in college football, folks. A&M's going to have to try to score from outside the red zone, I think, especially in their first game. Secondary is loaded. I mean, Benjamin Morris, mentioned Jaden Mickey earlier, and then safety Xavier Watts. He won the Nagurski Award last year. So it's going to be a real test for Connor Weigman. We're going to find out real fast that he's going to need some help. The offensive line, who struggled in some scrimmages, is going to have to step in. Like I mentioned, I told y'all, I talked to an NFL personnel scout a week and a half ago. He was at an Arkansas practice and a Texas A&M practice back-to-back days. He told me he was more impressed with Taylon Green than he was Connor Weigman, but he prefaced it again, like I mentioned earlier. He said that was one day. We all have bad days. I've thought this before about players, and it ended up biting me in the butt, but I'm just letting you know that day I was there, Connor Weigman wasn't great. So just telling you, they're in talking to some people at A&M in that building during the summer. They like what they see with Connor Weigman. They want to see him take more of that pro mindset. Hey, you're the quarterback at a major SEC school, at a school like Texas A&M. Let's be more mature. Let's be a true leader. Can he take that next step? I think people think he has that in him, but they want to see it. So that's key. I mean, then on defense, Nick scored. I think the Aggies are going to be really good on defense. Elko, I was with Mike Elko his first year at A&M under Jimbo Fisher. 18. Mike Elko never has a bad defense. Going back to Bowling Green, Wake Forest, Notre Dame, obviously when they were at Duke, and now they're not ever going to really be bad on defense. Nick scored in Purdue, transfer from Bryan College Station area. He should have a day. I mean, gone for Notre Dame is who Joe Alt's gone. Blake Fisher, their best two offensive linemen, are gone. No longer on the roster. They lost their starting left tackle, the Charles Jagsua kid, I do believe, for the season in fall camp. Nick Scorton should at least draw attention where it can open up some interior gaps. A&M should have a field day up front against this. I'm telling you right now, early lines I love. The under in this game. The under in this game. I think it's, 48, 49.5. I love this game. I will check it when we talk lines. But I love this game. I love this game from a betting standpoint, from an under standpoint. We'll talk more about the specific game on Wednesday when we give predictions. But I think A&M gets after him defensively, and it starts with Nick Scorton. And then finally, the LSU USC game on Sunday night in Las Vegas. It feels like Sunday night on Labor Day weekend at college football. It's LSU's night. Can they get a win? Will it be 5 straight years in a row they take a loss? Will be the 3rd straight for Brian Kelly in openers. But I think on offense, player to keep an eye on is Caleb Jackson. This is the matchup LSU has a massive advantage in. LSU, I think, is the best starting 5 offensive line in the SEC. Maybe not depth. I've said that. That's Georgia and Texas. But I think LSU on the offensive line, their starting 5, as good as anybody. Caleb Jackson, I think a beast no one really knows about outside of the state of Louisiana, and if you follow recruiting real hard, unless you're an LSU fan. I think he's going to have a big day. I think Josh Williams may be bell cow early, but I think Caleb Jackson takes it over. LSU has a matchup advantage on the front here. They do. The offensive line against USC's defensive line. I know it's DeAnton Lynn, new defensive coordinator. We got 2 new DCs in this game, Blake Baker and Deontay Lynn, coming over from UCLA. Lynn is just driving across the street to be USC's defensive coordinator. He got rid of Alex Grinch, who's now at Wisconsin? Yeah. But I mean, Deontay Lynch told people, I don't really like my front. It's not the body types I want. So they got some mismatches up front. Their defense is better on the back end if you go study them. They're better. They got better players in the back end. I think LSU can go lean on them and kind of be that balanced ground and pound. Again, Brian Kelly's had to be salivating for this game. I mean, this gets him back to his 2012 through 2015 Notre Dame games. It's smash mouth. Come on, Caleb Jackson. Let's get even explosive plays on the ground. Again, like I tweeted even before the show, this kind of run game, what LSU should do to USC, should make Les Miles salivate. Let's run Gotts down their throat. That's the play he would call when just the toss back. That's what he would do. I have dreams of Jordan Jefferson doing that. I think Caleb Jackson's the kid to keep an eye on, though, just because the line in front of him and just the player he is and just kind of the mismatch LSU has. So keep an eye on that matchup. Caleb Jackson, folks. If you're not an LSU fan, remember the name. On defense, Harold Perkins, too low-hanging fruit. Of course, I'm fired up to see what Blake Baker's done with him in the offseason. Does he look like he has more instincts in the box? Line him up on third down. I don't think he's a full-time edge rusher because of his size, especially not at the next level. But how instinctual does he look on the inside for Harold Perkins? Remember, last time Blake Baker got his hands on some raw talent in Baton Rouge is Edwards runs last year. He got the most out of Damone Clark, who is now with the Cowboys. Got to keep an eye on, though. I'm watching, though. Ashton Stamps. I'm watching Ashton Stamps, one of the corners. I think LSU's defense is going to be improved. It only can be, but they're going to be more aggressive, probably leaving some of their corners out on more of an island. But what's the matchup going to be with him against like Zachariah Branch, who's more of a proven guy in the return game, special teams-wise, than he is really at his true wide receiver position. Mekhi Lemon's another guy. You could throw Deuce Robinson, though. I mean, but he's a massive big X guy. So it'll be interesting there. Does he match up? USC's got talent on the outside, but it's not really proven talent, if you know what I mean. Jacoby Lane could be another good. How does Ashton Stamps match up against these guys? I mean, we've heard all offseason. Blake Ruffino was just in here with Are You Serious Sports. He was at every practice, said LSU's defense is improved. He liked what he saw, and they gave the offensive fits off all. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. That's why I still got LSU at 9-3. I got them 9-3. They're going to be better, but I think they're going to give up more explosives, cause more negative plays, and probably be better in the turnover department. It's not going to be a shutdown defense, but it can only be better. It can only be better. But like Brian Kelly said today, they can't allow USC to establish the run. And LSU's interior defensive line is a concern for me. It's been a concern for me all offseason. So that's something. But I'm going to be watching the secondary, though. Ashton Stamps is the guy on defense I'm going to be looking at if I'm an LSU fan or anybody watching this game. But before we get out of here, let's take a look at the chat room. And before we get into the opening lines of week play, I see we got 4 chats in here. What do we got here? Vol Steak, Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer is a goofball. Sorry, but he is, and you all know it deep down. Goofballs don't last. I have no comment on that. Vol Steak, once again, Clemson is going to be good, but I don't like their quarterback very much. I don't know. Kate Cover reminds me of almost like a younger, I mean, this will be his 3rd year, but like kind of Bo Nix, kind of reckless a little bit, kind of Sandlot stylish, improvision, can make good passes, fit it through tight windows, but also have bad interceptions. He needs a guy that can develop him. Maybe 2nd year with Garrett Riley as the OC at Clemson kind of takes him next up. I just don't see a lot of weapons on the outside. That's why I like Georgia leaning on them kind of towards the end. Again, not an official prediction. I'll give you that on Wednesday. But to your point there, Vol Steak again. Appreciate you listening, brother. Calling it right now. Tennessee will beat the brakes off Oklahoma because Josh Heupel wants revenge for getting fired. I don't know. That's a game I think Tennessee loses. The 2 games I have Tennessee losing, Ball State, are Oklahoma and Georgia. I got them beating Bama. Got them beating Florida. I think they lose week 0 for that first SEC game for whatever reason. People like to talk about it was Jackson Arnold's first game. It's going to be Nico's first road game in the league, too. It's going to be. Nico Iamaleava. Get used to pronouncing it, folks. Iamaleava. But no, I think Nico's going to be that guy I'm going to feel bad for a little bit, dude. Everybody's already like, oh, Heisman contender. Well, dude, he's only going to be a redshirt freshman going into his first true road start at Oklahoma in their first SEC game. It's going to be raucous. Their last quarterback who won them a national championship's coming as an opposition on the opposite side. That place is going to be nuts. That'd be one of the few tickets. That'd be one of the tickets in the entire conference slate. If you gave me like top 3 or 5 that I'd easily pick. At Texas A&M, stuff like that. But no, I think Oklahoma wins that game, honestly. Chris Floyd. There he is. Iamaleava. Appreciate you listening, Chris Floyd. On's in the gray. Guess on interception Bowman's will have on Junior on Temple. Shoot, I don't even know if Temple can stretch the field that much for him to get a bunch of interceptions. Maybe 1. Appreciate you listening, though. Chris Floyd, go Big Orange. Chris, appreciate you listening. Vol State, I can deal with that, beating Alabama. So, yeah, screw the Oklahoma game. He's like, you're telling me I'm going to get Bama, we're going to be 10-2. I can take that. But I appreciate you guys listening. Let's get in some early line reactions before I get you out of here. It's already 9 o'clock Monday night. Remember, first edition of Talking a Little Ball, folks. Talking a Little Ball with yours truly, Dave Talks Ball, baby. So I appreciate you joining us again. I'll be here Monday and Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, but early lines I like, and I'll give you my official betting lines on Wednesday night, like I will give you my official predictions throughout SEC play. Again, we have all the prediction videos out for week 1. We started last week on SEC Unfiltered channel between myself, Cole Thompson, and Chris Phillips. Go check them out, guys. They're all out there, but I'll give you my personal opinions. Again, that was kind of all of us collabing and us splitting those games up. But early lines I like. Remember, we don't sugarcoat it, folks. There's going to be some teams that I'm not taking some SEC teams. But these are some early lines I like. Georgia minus 13.5. Screams backdoor cover because I think Georgia's going to lean on Clemson in the second half. I'll just leave it at that without giving a prediction. I like Georgia in this second half. I think they'll wear down on a young and experienced Clemson defensive line, and I think Georgia's probably got the deepest offensive line. I think it goes about 7 deep. So I like Georgia to cover that. It may not look pretty early, may not look great early, but I think Georgia ultimately backdoor covers that, if not covers that straight up. I like that. Virginia Tech minus 13.5. The Vanderbilt Commodores getting 13.5. I like Virginia Tech. I think they're going to win by 2 more touchdowns. I'd like that in right now, guys. I would lock that in right now. Vanderbilt plus 13, or Virginia Tech minus 13.5. I think Virginia Tech wins that. Brent Pry and them are an under the radar team in the Big 12, in the ACC that I could easily see in Charlotte, especially with how you saw Florida State went down. League's open. I think it's going to be Miami Clemson. I know it's an SEC show, but just talking. Sorry, Vanderbilt fans, listen. I think Virginia Tech, Brent Pry coming in and get it done. I like Florida money line. I know we're going to preview this. Florida's getting 2.5 in the Swamp right now. It just feels like a game, the Swamp. There's certain games where your stadium, your fan base wills you to a victory, especially against an in-state rival. This is one of them. I think Florida's defense makes a play late. I like Florida. You're giving me points. Billy Napier's back against the wall. Mario Cristobal's not a phenomenal game day coach, phenomenal personnel guy or recruiter. Not a phenomenal game day guy, guys. Kind of panics. I like Florida. If you're giving me points, 2.5, give me Florida. Give me Florida. More experienced quarterback. Cam Ward coming over from Washington State. He's also been in Incarnate Word. This will be the loudest, most hostile environment he's ever played in. Graham Mertz has been in it. Give me Florida at home. Give me Florida at home. Old Dominion plus 21. I mentioned this is potential upset alert. I'm not ready to say I'm going to take this yet, but I don't hate it. Old Dominion was 6-7 last year. They were 6-7. They weren't a bad football team, folks. I'm not ready to take this, but if you're trying to go steal some money and that Vegas maybe just don't understand that South Carolina, again, this is my opinion. I don't think they're going to be great this year. I have them 4-8. Maybe overvalue them a little bit. I'm telling you, watch out for the Monarchs. And then Southern Miss plus 27.5. When is the last time Kentucky has just beat the brakes off anybody right out of the gate? And they usually play a lot of MAC schools. But Southern Miss, I think they'll play pretty good on defense. It's a must-win year for Will Hall. It's kind of a hot seat year for him. I think his players will be motivated week 1. They'll be as healthy as they can be. And then Kentucky's got a SEC opener in a must-win game at home the next week with South Carolina coming to town. They've lost to them 2 years in a row. Mark Stoops does not like Shane Beamer. That's personal. They're not going to show a lot against Southern Miss. I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed. If it got up to 28.5, I would hammer it. I'm telling you that. If it was up to 28.5, I'd hammer it. But I'm for sure going to take, just so you can lock them in, Georgia minus 13.5, Virginia Tech minus 13.5 against Vanderbilt, Florida money line against Miami at home. Ones I'm still holding out on, and I'll probably add some too when we come for the official predictions on Friday, but maybe Old Dominion plus 21 and Southern Miss plus 27.5. But just to leave you with some stuff, teams that need it the most this week before we get out of here, it's got to be LSU, right? I know Florida's going to be the obvious answer, but what's the narrative on Brian Kelly if they lose on Sunday? And that's his 3rd straight opening loss, 2 to Florida State, would be 1 to USC. LSU's 5th in a row, going back to Anna Orgeron. What would be the narrative? Because I still think they'd have some losses in them at that point. I mean, I know Florida's kind of the must, but I can still see Billy kind of fighting at it and getting to 6 and saving his job, and maybe even 5, depending on how bad it looks. I'm just saying the narrative, the in-state local media, I think would be all not. I shouldn't say after Brian Kelly's ass, but pressure would tune up. I mean, if you want to go see some entertainment, go turn into Matt Moscona and T-Bob Hebert's post-game show if they go lose to USC on Sunday night. It looks bad. I think they're going to win. I'm just saying the team that needs it from a perception standpoint. Florida and Billy Napier already have the perception they're not going to be there next year. They already have the perception, so let that sink in. Win or lose, that perception is still going to be there for Billy Napier. Some people are expecting it. They're underdogs. They're getting 2.5 points at home. LSU fans really expect to win this. If USC goes and torches you, they're going to be upset. If the offense doesn't look great, they're going to be upset against the USC defense. If you're turning the ball over, having special team blunders, penalties, I understand it's week 1. It's going to happen. But still, I think the local media would kind of start being like, all right, dude, what's going on? So I think from a changing perception, changing narrative standpoint, Brian Kelly needs this one more because Billy Napier's expectation narrative is already set no matter what. So I think it would really change for Brian Kelly. So I think LSU really needs it the most this weekend of anybody. But again, guys, I'm your host, Dave Shumate, coming at you here on the SEC Unfiltered platform. Again, I will be live every Monday and Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Tune in, folks. I appreciate all you guys listening. Chris Floyd, Vol Steak and the boys, Lee Walthor, Rob, Chicken, Jerry Moore from Pascagoula, Mississippi. Guys, I appreciate y'all listening. And the rest of you guys out there just like to listen and don't really have any questions. I appreciate y'all listening. Guys, go like, follow, hit the notification bell. Like I mentioned, you have stuff going on here all week. You're not going to remember, hey, Ball Talk with Dave at 9 p.m. Eastern. I got to put that. No, subscribe so when I go live, it immediately tells you. Come on, guys. 2 + 2 = 4. Let me help you. But again, guys, I hope you enjoyed the first edition of Talking Ball with Dave. You have a phenomenal evening. I will see you on Wednesday night.